guys, I'm Ella and this is my dad Scott and we're from Turnabout, and today we are going to be explaining how to build a slammer bot. So the really cool thing about slammer is that it has the exact same base as a slipper. So the only thing that's different is the slipper has a flipper arm assembly and the slammer has a grabber arm assembly. So like my dad just showed, slammer can grab and pick up bots and then like go and dump them in the arena, or it can even suplex them backwards if they're facing back to the arena. So that's super cool about the slammer, but it is the same exact base, it just has the different top arm assemblies.
And if you buy the slammer kit, it includes all of the slipper parts. So if you buy slammer, you can build it up into either, or build up the top assemblies, and we often, even in competition, will swap out the top assembly depending on our opponent.
Yeah. So that's super cool. And to get to this point where you have the base assembled with all of the components in it, and you don't have to have the tires and wheels on quite yet, because sometimes it can make getting a couple of the further steps, getting some of that in kind of hard, but you can. It doesn't really matter. But you just want to get to this point, and to do so, if you've bought a kit, you can actually go and watch our slipper assembly video. We'll link it up above and in the description, and you'll want to watch from the beginning to when we finish assembling and putting in all the components, and just stop right before we start assembling the flipper arm assembly. We'll link the timestamps in the description. And if you get a pre-soldered, then you can just watch from when we start putting in all the components to right before we assemble the slipper arm assembly. We'll just put all that information in the description, but you just want to get to this point with all of the components already in the bot, so then we can just make this grabber arm assembly. So to get started, the first thing to do, we're actually not going to start putting things together quite yet, but we have to check the clearance for where the aluminum rod will go through all of the holes in the arms and in the claws. So for the claws, which are these two pieces, you're just going to want to put it through the third hole up, which would just be the top hole on both of them, and you'll just want to make sure that those go through really smoothly, and you'll just want to make sure that it goes through all the way on both sides, and it will like
Pivots freely.
Yeah, it pivots freely. So if it's not pivoting freely and if it's not quite clear, then our kits come with one of these. What size is it?
It's a number 31 drill bit, and we've just started including that in there. Our printing is pretty precise, but just with the variation in filament, sometimes the holes are a little bit tight, and we'd always rather them be too tight than too loose.
Yeah.
So if you have an older kit that doesn't have the drill bit in it yet and it's too tight, you can snag a number 31 drill bit on Amazon for like $1.50. Some of them you're going to go ahead and like really twist it through to get it good and clear for a clean pivot. Others you just barely turn it in to make it fit kind of snug, and she'll go over that.
Yeah. So for the claws, if it's not clear yet and the aluminum rods don't go through, you'll just screw that through all the way, and you'll just want to get that nice and clear because this is gonna pivot on the aluminum rod, so you just want to make sure that it's very clear. You can do that on both arms. Just go all the way through, and you can go in and out a couple times just till it is all the way clear, and when you put the aluminum rod in, it will move freely.
And you shouldn't even need to mount the drill bit in a drill.
Yeah.
We just do it all just twisting the drill bits.
Yeah. Sometimes it can help if it's a little bit tighter or the hole's a little bit smaller. It can help if you have another person available. They can hold it for you while you spin it around, just because handling it can be kind of challenging, but it's really just your preference. But then for these are the arms. They're a little bit different from the claws because you'll want to see how they line up. The right one will go on the right, and the letters there are letters like on the very bottom saying like right and left, but they should be facing the inside. But for these, so I'm going to show you with the left one. If it's on the left, then you want to go through on the inside, and you want to screw up until the screw or the drill bit doesn't quite reach the top, because this will actually make sure that the aluminum rod has like a lip that will keep it secure. So when you actually put the rod in,
captures it so the rod can't go out either side.
So, and like with this one, this is, it'll go in, but it won't come out through the other side. So it kind of will just like lock everything in. And so you just want to make sure that it'll go in, but I mean, it's fine if it comes out the other side, but just having
a little dab of super glue fixes everything. Just a small drop right on the edge, which is never a bad idea, particularly if you're going into full combat competition.
Yeah, it just makes sure that everything will stay in place. But once you have that, once you figure out all the clearances with the aluminum rod, you just want to go ahead and get the spacers, which are the little like cylinders with the holes in them. There's a longer one and there's a shorter one, and then you want the link, which is going to be what is connected to the servo so that the whole assembly will move. And then you'll also want to get the right claw, and you'll know that it's the right claw because it will have 2 holes with the like opening for the head of the screw in it. And you'll just want to take the black screw that we include in the kit, and for this one we're going to go through the top. You can go through the top or the bottom, but it will just change whether it will grab.
It's kind of the strength of the grab or the speed of the flip. So play with which one you prefer, if you want it to grab stronger, or if you want it to still kind of be able to flip a little bit faster.
Yes, so for this video we're just going to be putting it through the top hole or the hole that's in the middle. So you'll just want the slots to face to the right, and you'll want that to go through, and this should spin freely and just move well on the screw. And then next you'll want the longer spacer first, and you'll put that on, and you just want it to slide on smoothly and just be able to go on fairly well. And then the next thing that we're going to put on is the link, which is going to be attached to the servo arm, and this you're going to want to put on with the like larger side facing to the left, and that will also spin freely. And then you'll want the smaller spacer, and that will go on last, and you'll also want that one to spin freely. You just want all of these to spin nice and well, just so that they can all move on that joint. And then now you can actually start assembling. So this is good to do like as the second part, because this is actually going to be the first step. So once you get all of these on, you'll get this second claw, and this one you actually kind of want it, you want to have to use a screwdriver for this so that it will stay in.
So this also uses the same 1.5 millimeter hex as all of the other bolts. So the included driver in the kit works on that. It's the only different screw. So we include these in all the kits.
These two are the same screwdrivers.
Yep. If you want nice drivers, we really like these Wera ones, and really the Wera 1.5 is what we use for almost everything.
We can put the link to that in the description too. So what we like to do for all of our joints is we'll get the screw completely tight, and that's why you want the screw to actually thread into the plastic on the left arm, because you'll want it to like stay secure. But once you get that all the way tight, because you're going to want these to move, we just like to back it off about half a turn. So you go all the way tight and then back it off just half a turn, and then that'll let everything just still move freely. Just play with how much you have to back it off. You just want everything to move nice and well, but still keep everything in alignment. So that is good, and then we can go on to the next step.
If the screw wants to back out, again, Just a small drop of super glue.
Yes.
Fixes everything.
That's his motto. So after that, we're going to start putting everything together, and this is basically going to sandwich the arms and the claws together. So the first thing is I'm going to just start with the right arm. You can start with whichever. I'm just gonna move from right to left. So you're gonna put this in the top hole. The aluminum rod is going to go in the top hole, and again it's going to have the little lip so it's not going to poke all the way through. And then you put the aluminum rod sticking out of the arm. You're going to put that through the top hole on the claws, and you'll just put that through both of them, and it should all move, and the rod should be all the way in. So then you're just going to take the left arm and capture all of that, and then it's all sandwiched together, and the arms should both, like, the two arms should have captured the aluminum rod, so it shouldn't like fall off or anything. And if it does, again, a dab of super glue. So then after that, we can actually start putting the arm assembly onto the base. But before we do that, we're actually going to get the paper clip, which is what's going to hold everything on, and that's going to go right across here, and it's going to go through the holes in the arm. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to straighten this out, and you want to just undo the paper clip, and have your pliers. He always has a Swiss tool on him, and these come in very handy. So I just want to get it all straightened out, and so once you get that straight, you can line it up on the slipper, so where it's going to go through. The holes that it's going to go through are right behind the tires, so this is the part where it can be easier to have the tires taken off. But if you've already super glued the tires into place, which is good to do for competition so they don't fall off, then it's really fine. Like, you should still be able to get to the hole. But the first thing to do is you're going to measure it up against where it's going to go through, and you'll just want it, like, you'll want it to stop right before the hole on this side, and you'll want to cut it off right before it ends on this side too. So you want it to be just a tiny bit smaller than the entire width of the bot on this side, and that's just because you don't want it to accidentally snag a tire, or you don't want to accidentally like scrape yourself or anything on if it's sticking out. It's
the only possibly sharp piece of metal on the whole bot.
Yes. So it's fine if you get it cut like a little bit short, and it'll still be captured on both sides because it'll go through both of these sections. So it's really fine if it's like kind of shorter than what mine will be, but like longer is better just because you want all that insurance. But you can just cut it off right before the end. So you can just...
We've taken several direct hits from verticals in the paper clip in the back, and it bends it, but usually the flipper's still completely functional.
Yeah.
After the match, we just straighten it back out and keep going.
Yep. Okay. Just cut it right there. Careful not to fling it off, hit anything. And then just straighten the end back out. And actually, so we're gonna put a V-bend in the end of it, and that'll just make sure that it stays in. If it's your first time like assembling this, and it's like, it might be kind of hard to get through just because that is super secure. And then if it's your first time putting it through and it doesn't go through super smoothly, then you really don't need to put the V-bend in it because it'll already be captured. But if you're going to be trading out the arm assemblies, like from a slipper to a slammer, then you'll probably want to put it in just as like a little bit of extra insurance so that it doesn't accidentally slide out and like catch on the tires or scratch you. So to put a V-bend in, you'll want it like just a little bit from the end of it, and you'll just want it like a slight V-bend.
Just a little, maybe 15 degrees, just enough so that when it gets in there, it's got a little bit of a spring that keeps the paperclip from moving from side to side.
Yeah.
And if it's your first time assembling it, it's never a bad idea to, while the paperclip is still whole, to go through the chassis. Just enough to make sure that it goes through pretty easily. They should all go through pretty easily now.
Yeah, we just got new printers, so they're a little bit more precise, and we're very happy with them. But so you can just start poking the paperclip through once it's all cut, and so you'll get it through the first section, and what I like to do is have it stick out a little bit after it gets through, and that'll just let you line it up a little bit easier with the arms. So if it's sticking through a little bit, then you can kind of feel when the hole is lined up. So once it's lined up, it's easier to use pliers usually. And then once it gets in, it's kind of good to know where the holes are so that you can just think about like the alignment when you're putting it in. Sometimes I find that it's kind of just finicky when you're first getting it on, because you can't really see exactly where it is. You kind of just have to feel around for it at first, but then it'll go through, and once it's actually through the first section of this and the first arm, it can be easier to pull it through instead of pushing, just because then you'll have a little bit more leverage. But you can get that through, and then get it through the second arm, and you can kind of just line up where it is, because then you'll be able to see the hole, which will make it go through a little bit easier. But a pair of pliers is very helpful for this.
And I like to grab where I'm only trying to move it a little bit at a time, so that if it does suddenly pop through, if you have your thumb in the wrong place, you don't stab yourself in the thumb, at least not too deeply.
Yeah. And then the next side is probably the hardest, because you can't really see where the hole on the inside of this section is. So there will be like a tiny little bit of wiggle room, and you can kind of poke the paperclip through a little bit so that you can feel around for where the hole will be. And then it's also a little bit harder probably because you put a V-bend in, so that can just make it, you gotta use a little bit of force on it. But
nice.
Once you've gotten it all the way through, it shouldn't stick out on either side. It should have a little bit of room on both sides where it's completely inside the plastic. So you just need like a little bit so it doesn't accidentally scratch you. But once you've got that through, then that is all secure. The only thing that you need to change the arm assembly from the slipper to the slammer is actually just the paper clip and the screw connected to the servo arm. So it's actually really easy to change. But then the next thing, okay, the next step is going to be putting the rubber band onto the servo arm. Now the rubber band is actually so that when you're playing, it won't go too far over, and when it does, it'll just snap back to where it is, and it'll reset itself. So it'll usually do it just fine without the rubber band. Just for competition, it makes it a little bit more convenient.
Yeah, it generally resets anyway, but the rubber band makes sure that it resets the first time every time. Mm-hmm. So like she said, in competition, it'll make sure that you're just quicker to be able to grab again. Yeah.
So to put the rubber band on, there'll be 2 rubber bands in each kit. These are for the...
It goes around the motor, the foam that's around the motor.
So there'll be 2.
There's nothing special about the rubber bands. Any small rubber band, and you can even just use a piece of a rubber band and tie a knot above the link.
Yeah. So what you're going to do is you're going to go right under the paper clip, So like right between the paper clip and where the plastic is, and just go up. So
for those of us that don't have
it.
the dexterity that she does, you could use tweezers or pliers to reach in there. Somebody's slender little fingers are capable of doing this without pliers.
So you'll just want to get both of them on one side, and it'll just like be, I guess, like wrapped in half around it, so that then you can put one side of the rubber band through the other side and just pull the side that was put through the other one up, so it just like catches itself, and then it's connected to the paper clip. So then after that, you'll just loop the hole that you have around the link, and then it should just stay there by itself while you're gonna screw the link to the servo arm, which is the next step. So to do that, you'll just want to line it up. Sometimes this can be hard to get it all together, but it should all be there. And then you're just going to use, again, a 1.5 hex screw. And it's easier to first put the screw onto like a screwdriver, so that then you can use the screwdriver as like a extension, so it's easier to reach. You'll just put it on the very tip and kind of hold it with your finger like that, and then it's easier to go through the link first, and then once it's in there, you can put the screw through the top hole of the servo arm, and it should thread in, because you don't want these to be you don't want them to come apart. So again, for any of the pivots, we want to screw it in all the way and then back off about half a turn so that it'll still move freely. So then
we use the same screw there as all of the top armor screw.
Yes.
So a lot of servos come with a screw kind of for that, but we like to try and use the same hardware everywhere, so you can use the same tool, in the pits.
Makes it very convenient. So then, all the way and then back off half the screw. And then again, you'll have to you'll have to tie the rubber band so that it will like be tight enough. We just put like one knot in it. Let's see here. Everything lined up.
I thought you got the knot in that fast. I was going to be
no.
really impressed.
You just want to do like it around itself. So then it doesn't have to be too tight. You want it just tight enough where it'll reset. So it can be just like
kind of touching on it when it's there, so that when it's stretched up, it just gives it a little bump down.
Yeah. And if you get it too tight, then you can really just kind of pull the knot up and it'll loosen it. And if you just pull on the rubber band, it'll kind of stretch it out, so then it's a little bit looser too. And it's not a special rubber band, like my dad was saying. If it breaks, you can just put another one in. You'll have to unscrew the servo arm, but it's not that hard. So then once you do that, you can actually put the top armor on, and it just has a little U in it. So you can't use the same top armor for the slipper and the slammer, because just of the servo, for the servo arm and the link, you don't want it to accidentally run into it. But it'll have a U in it, and that should be facing the back of the bot. Just want to make sure that the correct side is up. It should have a...
The armor does all have chamfers, so that they're angled down towards the chassis.
Yeah. So then, again, to 1.5 hex screws. These are actually sometimes easier. You can get them started into the top armor before you put it onto the arms, and that'll just make sure that, like, if it has a little bit of the screw sticking out, then you can kind of line it up a little bit easier, because you won't be able to see the holes. But once it like catches, then you'll know that you are on it.
And it's never a bad idea to check the screws into the arms and where the plow goes, and even down into the chassis. Like we said, generally all the holes are a very good fit, but we do err a little bit on the tight side. So kind of pre-running them in a little bit can make the final assembly much easier.
But just a little bit, because you don't want it to be too loose, because then it'd be bad if the top armor fell off during a match.
Yes. You're not trying to wallow it out. Just
a little bit to make sure that it goes in. Because sometimes it can be hard to get the screws in if you can't see the holes. So just making sure that they're large enough and you're not just screwing into plastic around the hole is good. But once you have that in, you can put, I'm going to put the top armor on next and save the plow for last.
Sure.
For the top armor, so one of the cool things, we have tons of different filaments, but sometimes it's hard to match colors just because the plow is TPU. We're actually going to make a video about the new plows that we have, which are really cool. But these the greens, and we have a lot of colors that line up fairly well. But we're just using 2 greens for this video.
But the TPU plows might be a slightly different shade than the rest of the bot. So if you order a kit, just know the TPU plows we think are a big upgrade, both for playing at home. The flex in them actually adds a lot of energy to the match, and it's fun. And they're nearly indestructible at 150 grams. So we'll go into that in another video.
Yes. So then for these, 1.5 hex screws for like all of it, but we're just gonna use 2 on each side. And again, the top armor can vary in the size of the holes. For the top armor, it doesn't really matter because it'll just be sandwiched in between the screw and it should thread into the chassis plastic. But if they're a little bit tighter, you can actually thread them in a little bit before you put it onto the chassis. These are a little bit looser, so I'm hoping that they'll stay on while I put it onto the chassis. But that's right side. There we go. And then for these, you can kind of just feel when they line up because you'll be able to feel the hole beneath it. One thing is, if you're screwing it in and the screw is forcing the top armor and the chassis and the top armor away from the chassis, that probably means that you aren't in the hole, and you might have to use the screw, like take the top armor off and then use the screw to screw it in a little bit more, just
to like
in
clear
the
the hole in the chassis. Yeah.
So that, because it can make it hard to get the two together if they're not exactly lined up. And one thing about the top armor, it's kind of going to force the front and the back together to like squeeze it together, and that is just another way to make sure that the motor stays in really secure. So it'll just kind of, you might have to like squeeze it together a little bit to get the second screw on, just because that's how it's meant to be, to hold the motor really
it closes the top so that the motor can't come out. With our new snap-in motor mounts, in competition you can still use a zip tie, so like the features are there to add a zip tie around the motor. You don't really need to. I mean, if you took a direct hit from a vert, maybe it would pop up, but that's kind of why the top armor helps squeeze it so that it can't open enough to let the motor out.
And then this side, so for the left side, I put the screws in the top armor before I put the top armor onto the chassis. But for this side, I'm also going to show you. You can just line them up. Sometimes this can be easier because you can kind of see through the top armor hole if you're lined up with the chassis hole. So that can make it sometimes easy. But it can also just be if the holes on the top armor are a little bit tighter, then you can screw them through a little bit and then kind of feel where the holes in the chassis are. So then once you've got those screwed down, you can tighten these all the way down because they're just plastic to plastic and it's the armor, not a joint. So you can just screw those in really well. And then it's time to put the plow on. This is probably the most, like, not complicated, but most involved part of screwing things together, because so in the plow there's going to be a little lip in the bottom, and within the lip there will be 2 pockets that the tips of the arms will actually go in. So those will just be seated in there, and you want to make sure that you get those together well. And then after you get the tips of the arms into the little pockets, then you can hold the 2 together and screw it on. I see.
Hard to do while showing it to the camera.
Yeah. Okay. And then once you got those in, you can kind of open the bot up so that you can hold them together. So sometimes
because of the angles, the plow has to be all the way onto the arms to put the screw in. So it'll be clearer once you start to try it, but you want to have it all together, and you'll see she's got it all pinched, and then she's still looking to make sure that the plow doesn't pull away from the arms when she runs the screw in. So it's a little bit finicky, but it's kind of the best way we could come up with to get it all really well captured.
Yeah, so you want to pinch that and then make sure when you do the first screw, if it starts, make sure that it stays in the pockets while you're screwing it on, because that can help with the alignment.
Just in the pocket.
But you'll just want to make sure that these are all lined up, because once you get it together, this is one of the steps that it can be very helpful to have someone holding it for you while you're screwing it in, just because if you get this screw started and it doesn't go into the hole, then it can throw off the whole alignment and it won't go in.
Yeah, actually that's in now, so
yeah.
Once you get one of them in,
Then
generally
it's
it
all
all
fine.
holds in place.
Yeah. And then another benefit of the new TPO plow is that if you're just battling with someone, and it's like in an open arena where it's easy to take it out, and the TPU slots like pop off the tips of the arms, then it's just really easy to bend it back over and just put it back in. But that shouldn't happen once it's screwed all the way down, but if it does and someone manages to get it off, it's really easy you don't have to take the whole plow off, which is really good.
And in fairness, sometimes in competition, particularly heading towards the finals, a little bit of super glue between I actually just go on the side, but to connect the arm to the plow.
Yeah.
Generally just in full combat and often towards the end.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and glue it on just to make sure that it doesn't come up.
But then once you do that, it is all done. And that is a fully assembled slammer bot. So once you get the entire top arm assembly complete, it's really easy just to switch it between the slipper and the slammer. Like again, sometimes in competition, when we know what bot we're going up against, we'll just swap them out depending on like what kind of bot it is and what would give us the advantage. So it just makes it super easy. You just have to unscrew the link in the servo arm, take the paper clip out, and just swap it around, and that'll make it super fun.
Some people prefer the narrow setup, and it's much easier to print without support like this.
Yeah.
And it's definitely narrow enough to catch any bot on any angle.
Yeah.
Some people prefer the wider arms. It depends on what you feel is more effective. In order to spread them, we just use a normal heat gun. They're like $20 on Amazon. And you just heat up the back section right here. You can do it with the whole bot assembled. Just try and get your heat right there, and then you just spread them out, hold them for 10 or 15 seconds to cool, and then they're at the width that you want.
Yep, and we can do a video showing you how we do that with the heat gun. So that is how to assemble it. So like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and if you want more, this bot is actually for sale now. You can get you might be able to get the bot that we just assembled, and will be on YouTube. But thank you for watching. Bye.
Bye.